Standing Finance Committee resumes.
Madam Chair, Head 84, Ministry of Labor and Social Partnership Relations, in the amount of $7,237,600.
Minister, you may begin.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me first introduce the team, and I must qualify that to say the very, very hardworking team of the Ministry of Labor and the Social Partnership Relations. We have here today Permanent Secretary, Dr. Best. We have on my right, on my left, Chief Labor Officer, Mrs. Hope Greenidge. Behind her, Deputy Permanent Secretary Howell, Coordinator, Ms. Farley, Senior Accountant, Ms. Austin, Mrs. Austin. We have Program Officers, well, before that, Director of Barbados Employment and Career Counseling Service, Mrs. Walcott Dennis. The Chief Research and Planning Officer, Mr. Norville, and 3 program officers, some of the people who really help us carry the weight, Mr. Randy Clark, Ms. Erica Watson, and Ms. Maureen Bowen. And I place on record my thanks to those who are here. As I said, these by and large are the heavy lifters, but also to the team of the ministry that I have really the honor to be called on to lead at this time. By way of introduction, and I will say to the Honorable Chamber and yourself, Madam Chair, that I will not make the error of 2020. This will be a shared presentation. And when I say presentation, I'm speaking about the introduction. It will be shared between myself and the Permanent Secretary. I will speak to the philosophy and policy direction that the ministry is taking. The Permanent Secretary will speak to some of the programs in our program matrix, our results framework, and then I'll wrap by just addressing a couple of areas, specifics, not in detail, but just mentioning a few specifics, and then we give way to any questions that honorable members may have to ask us. The Ministry of Labor and Social Partnership Relations, Madam Chair, is mandated to work with others to create a just society and to position workers in Barbados in the context of that just society, to position workers for personal fulfillment and for effective participation in national development. And that is important for us. That is those are the marching orders, so to speak, within which we execute our mandate. And so the various arms of the ministry work together. They are interconnected, each building on others, and we work together and seek to improve that working together to allow us to execute properly the mandate that the people of this country have given to us as we work through the spending of $7 million. So why do we need $7.2 million in this ministry? We begin in relation to the various branches of our ministry by recognizing that good policy must be based on good information. And so the idea of labor market research, forecasting, must form the underpinning of whatever we do as a ministry. The MRSU is tasked with that work, labor market forecasting, labor market research, saying to us, this is where we're at, these are the kind of skills we need, this is what the future portends, this is what we have to train and educate and encourage as we move our people forward. And then on that, we base our people development policy and strategy, or HRD, as many of you know it to be. The policy that speaks to the development of our people is based upon that market research, that forecasting. After that, we prepare people for effective participation in country development. And that preparation speaks to our interaction with training institutions, educational institutions. It also speaks to our specific responsibility for career counseling for workers and potential workers. Then after that, we seek to develop opportunities for people to find gainful employment. We work to match workers and potential workers with opportunities on the island, but we are tasked specifically with developing avenues of employment, avenues of personal development outside of the country as well. And so we have what we call our overseas programs, and you will hear more details about those as we move forward. So we are building, we are developing people, we are finding opportunities for them. But this has to be done in an environment where there is a harmonious industrial relations climate. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, honorable members, there must be some kind of order. There is order on the block, there's order in church, there's order in schools, there's order in this honorable chamber. In the industrial relations environment, there also must be some kind of order if we are to be productive and fulfilled workers and citizens. Part of that harmonious industrial relations climate also speaks to the fact that workers must execute their tasks in decent and safe working environment. So we pay a lot of attention to occupational safety and health. We've actually become one of the, maybe we can call ourselves an expert ministry in the Caribbean context. There are other Caribbean islands that turn to us for advice and guidance in the area of occupational safety and health. All of this speaks, honorable members and chair, to the creation of a fair and just society, which is a critical part of the mandate of our ministry, exemplified possibly in a visible and tangible way through the creation of the Social Justice Committee. And that also calls for the building of an involved and effective third sector. The third sector has been involved in country development, maybe from the beginning, principally probably in relation to faith-based organizations, but that has expanded. Our ministry seeks, as it works towards social justice, it seeks to prepare and create and involve a credible and an effective third sector. So that, Madam Chair, honorable members, forms the underpinning, the philosophical construct that we use as a ministry on which to build the programs that you will hear now from the Permanent Secretary, Dr. Best.
Your introduction is 10 minutes, so technically you have 2 more minutes to wrap up with your staff.
The Permanent Secretary will try her best to share in the time that you have indicated. Thank you.
At the end of which, please move the head. Sound.
Good morning, Madam Chair. I am the Permanent Secretary. My name is Dr. Karen Best, and I will try in 2 minutes to outline. The Minister laid the foundation for our presentation this morning, and when he speaks about the labor market research and forecasting, we are going to be looking at identifying strategic sectors with high growth potential to create jobs after COVID-19 and the occupational skills that will be most demanded by employers in a post-COVID recovery. To do this, we have to update the Barbados Standard Occupational Classification, commonly known as BARSOC, and we are going to be doing this in collaboration with the third sector, stakeholders.
Sorry, Ms. Bess. Honorable Leader Opposition.
Order, Madam Chair, and of course I will await your ruling on the matter, but it seems to me that as a layperson, this is not proper. We are at a stage in this procedure where the estimates for this ministry are being presented. The head has not yet been moved by the substantive minister. And it seems to me if we're having inputs from members of the public service, then we are into that area of this proceedings which constitutes debate. The head having not been moved, it seems improper to me that any voice is speaking on it other than that of the minister. No problem with the individual speaking, I'm just questioning the procedure.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, after consultation, I believe that you are correct. The head has to be moved before other members of their committee speaks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And in moving the head, I will simply say that this ministry, in relation to some basic questions we ask ourselves, how do we assist the vulnerable in our society? For example, regulations to the Safety and Health at Work Act in the final stages of preparation, incorporating ILO conventions in our domestic legislation, addressing the scourge of gender-based violence, ensuring that forgotten groups like petrol station attendants are included in our safety and health regulations, working to ensure that those at the bottom of the pay scale have a livable minimum wage. We support our trade unions, we support our employers' organizations. We also work to assist the productive sectors and assist with government's expanding capital works program. Job Start Plus, our first jobs program, is one of those. Training employers in legislation and in best practices, our people development policy, and of course, our social partnership, which is very involved and for which this ministry has some responsibility. And we also, even though we are considered a social ministry, as opposed to what others may consider the economic productive sectors, we also have a role in improving competitiveness and removing obstacles to growth. And we do that through our education, our training, particularly by making information that will assist the productive sectors, making that information available on a 24/7 basis. That is to say, we use social media, we use the internet to get that done. We focus a lot on safety and health at work, our national workplace wellness policy, strengthening our Empowerment Rights Tribunal structure, and the labor code, which we have started work on implementing. These are all things that will help us to improve competitiveness in this country, in this economy, and speak to removing obstacles to the growth that we are so aggressively pursuing. And so with that, Madam Chair, allow me to move Head 34 in the Head 84 in the amount of $7,237,600. And I beg that this head stand part.
Not as yet, okay. Second. You going? Okay. Honorable member for St. George North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank the Minister of Labor for his presentation. As he was speaking, there are three things that jumped out at me: the support for labor, the minimum wage, and occupational safety and health. First question I would like to ask the Minister is, what program does the ministry have in place during the coming financial year to demonstrate its support for labor?
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Our support for labor is ongoing. In terms of special programs, I think I understand the question, but I need to make it very, very clear that we have ongoing rapport, dialogue with trade unions and with the union, the umbrella body representing employers in this country. We also have a relationship with the Caribbean Congress of Labor. We have been, over the years, working with the trade union movement, particularly in the matter of training. And I will allow the Chief Labor Officer to speak some more to what that will look like as we move forward in terms of working with the trade union movement, both the Barbados Workers Union, and we've also have in place, or are putting in place, a plan to assist the Congress of Trade Unions and Staff Associations as well, particularly in relation to the matter of occupational safety and health.
You're finished?
Okay, I was allowing for the response from the Chief Labor Officer. But as a follow-up, therefore, you spoke about support for labor and you spoke about strengthening the Employment Rights Act. And certainly you're aware that labor has had significant challenge with a number of aspects of the Employment Rights Act. One of the most recent challenges being confronted is the fact that a number of matters are not going through the conciliatory process through the Labor Department and are being fast-tracked to the Employment Rights Tribunal. And yet I noted, Minister, in your submissions and estimates last year, you were able to comment that most matters are settled at the level of the Chief Labor Officer and don't have to be passed on to the ERT. So what provision is made in the estimates this year and in your programming to strengthen the capacity of the Labor Department, that is the conciliatory capacity and the labor inspection capacity, so that access to justice is available to people at that level and matters don't have to be escalated to the ERT where there is a financial implication for people who can least afford it?
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. The matter of strengthening our processes and strengthening the institution that is the Labor Department, I'm going to ask and I'm not sure how we're operating, because I wanted the Chief Labor Officer to weigh in on the last question. And I'm saying here that I'm not going to be operating the way I did last year, so I'm not going to be answering in full detail every question. My team is here and they're going to support me, and I would wish that they'd be allowed to make their input, because I will not be making all of the inputs. I'll ask the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry to speak to what we're doing in relation to strengthening the capacity of the Ministry in particularly working with the International Labour Organization in the matter that you raised in your second question.
Dr. Karen Best, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Labor and Social Partnership Relation. In relation to strengthening the Labor Department, We have just had some very fruitful discussions with the ILO to provide a number of training opportunities and avenues to make sure that we strengthen the department in the areas of conciliation, in the areas of mediation. We are looking at occupational safety and health. We're also looking at labor legislation, harmonizing the labor legislation, and at the end of that process, we should have fully trained and even more fully trained officers who can offer a lot more to the employers and to the, in collaboration also with our stakeholders, which are the unions, to make sure that the workers are advised in a manner that can redound to their benefit. Additionally, what we are also looking at and what we have started is that we are looking in the Labor Department where we are having a number of webinars that would provide advice to the employers, because the employers are reaching out and we need to respond, because once the employers have been advised and are knowledgeable, then the workers would be treated in a fair manner.
Honourable Member, do you have a third question?
Yes, Chair, it's just a follow-up to that, because I heard about training for the Labor Department, but I didn't hear about full resourcing of the Labor Department to meet the challenges that are out there, especially made worse by the COVID-19 environment. So training is one component, but labor inspection has fallen short during the last period. And a possible reason for that is because of the increase in the number of conciliatory meetings that the Labor Department has had to oversee. So what is going to be done to strengthen the Labor Department to ensure that it can not only meet the conciliatory demand, but also perform the necessary labor inspection so that we can avoid matters perhaps even coming to conciliation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just let me respond a bit to that. The Ministry of Labour and Social Partnership Relations operates within the construct of government. And by that, I mean we are in a situation where we're trying, we meaning government, is trying to balance, and I think doing it pretty well, some competing interests. And when I use the word competing, I'm not referring to something at the expense of another. We've been called on, and again, when I say we, I'm referring to government, and that includes this ministry. We've been called on to be more efficient in that which we have, recognizing that resources have to be spread across a number of very important and very critical areas. What has happened over time, and if I speak particularly to conciliation, inspections, our occupational safety and health section has been an integral part of the COVID-19 monitoring unit.
Beyond Croy.
I'm not sure if that was a signal, but our ministry is an integral part of that monitoring unit and has been using those exercises as part of what would ordinarily be their own inspections of workplaces. As it relates to conciliation and the increasing amount of matters that need to be conciliated, again, we've realized, and I think COVID-19 has taught many of us this truth, that we have to become more efficient so that we are not able to just add additional persons, if that is really where the question was going. It is not simply a matter of adding additional persons. We have, given the constraints, the budgetary constraints, the revenue constraints of government at this time, have to be more effective with the resources that we have. And what I can say to this Honourable Chamber and to the Honourable Member for St. George North is that this ministry's estimates are probably one of the few, maybe the only one, that has not had to be, and I want to say this very nicely, adjusted downward. And it is because government as a whole, the Ministry of Finance as well, recognizes the importance of the work of this ministry, the critical nature of it in relation to our people, the workers of this country, and we in the ministry, while understanding government's constraints, have determined that we will be even better with the existing staffing arrangements that we have. Now, one thing I will say to conclude this response is that we believe that we are going to have approval to allow us to make some changes so that there are some, and I'm going to be a little bit vague only because I cannot say this before Cabinet and the Ministry of the Public Service approves it in any detail. We believe that we will have the opportunity to remove some of the existing responsibilities from officers, from some of the senior officers in the Labor Department, and have them separated so that those officers can focus more intently on what the Honourable Member for St. George North would have been referring to, the matters of conciliation, education, that are our responsibility.
Thank you. Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions. I found it very interesting, the Honourable Minister holds the view that the vote of $7,237,600 is testament to the fact that government salutes the work this ministry is doing, and that there was no adjustment done with this ministry, as was with some others, because the ministry is doing a great job. I think the funds here are very low. And at a very critical time in our economic context, even our socio-economic context, where the policies and the regulatory framework and the level of influence that this ministry is able to exert upon the working environment in Barbados is very critical. Now, I just have a couple of questions. I would really want to hear the minister give his characterization of the working relations environment in Barbados at this time. People hold different views as to what obtains out there, both pre-COVID and now during COVID, as to the character, the nature of working relations or relationships in Barbados, whether we're talking about from a perspective of the state, labor, private capital. How does the minister honestly characterize working relations, the working relations environment in Barbados today? I think particularly connected with that issue is the dynamic of capital dominance in Barbados. That has always been the case. Some measure of balance had been struck with the work of the labor movement over the years, and gains of labor because of social policy, positions of respective administrations over time. but it is the view of many that there have been some reversals, that there's a new dominance of capital in the working relations environment in Barbados. I would like to hear the minister and his team give their characterization of the working relations environment in Barbados now.
Thank you very much, Honorable Leader of the Opposition. The working environment, and I spoke to this at length some weeks ago, can be characterized as tense. And there are a number of reasons for that, and I believe the question is asked so that those reasons can be repeated. There is a fear on the part of workers, uncertainty about the future of their jobs. That is a real fear. When a person is unsure if they will have a job tomorrow or next week, they will act or sometimes react in ways that they would not ordinarily so do. Those workers also have the attendant fear of illness. There are also many of them trying to be teachers' assistants while at home. There are also some of them, many of them, or many of us, because all of us really are workers, who have dependents who may either be elderly or persons living with disabilities, who we have additional responsibilities for. Those matters work together to help to create a very uncertain and fearful situation. On the part of businesses, there's also much uncertainty. There are persons who have worked for years, maybe decades, to build a business and are wondering if it will disappear before their eyes, who have workers and go to sleep at night hoping that nobody turns up positive so that the business has to close to look after that situation. So they too have their perspectives and they have their fears. All those things, Madam Chair and Honorable Leader of the Opposition, work together to create the tensions that we are seeing. And so there has been quite a lot of reaction, some of it uncharacteristic, some of it, some may say, is characteristic, but I say that some of it is quite uncharacteristic. But I think we understand where it comes from. And understanding where it comes from allows us then better to address how we keep the fabric of industrial relations together. The Honorable Leader of the Opposition spoke to capital dominance, and I'll share a matter that we had to address very early in this pandemic situation, and that is to say about maybe May or April of last year. There was a feeling on the part of employers that the matter of laying off workers when you have less than 6 weeks within which to do it, so there's an announcement of a pause or lockdown or shutdown, and there is not the 6 weeks for the consultation that is required. There was the view that what was required in that situation was simply writing a letter to the Chief Labor Officer informing that we are laying off X number of workers, and once that letter went off and you were satisfied that it may have reached, then you proceeded to effect the reduction in the level of staffing. We made it very clear, very early, and this is where this government and this ministry has been working really closely with the social partnership, because it was at the social partnership that we were able to address that matter head-on. And as the honorable member for St. Michael West knows, we have, and I know that he still does have a policy of facing it and fixing it. So we never say that there are no issues, but we know that we have to face them and to fix them. I come to this honorable place with that as my background. My predecessor from the place where I come from, that place that sent me, had that approach. And so we made it quite clear to capital, to business leaders and business owners within the context of the social partnership, that that was actually a breach of the law. And so we've seen significant improvement in, and I'm using that as an example, we're seeing significant improvement in the approach of businesses to the matter of laying off staff. There's some outliers still, and we live in a real world. I'm not going to say that there will always be outliers, but there are some, and we continue to work in those situations to make sure that there is not the what was referred to as the dominance of capital. We make it quite clear our support for collective bargaining, because collective bargaining, a fundamental principle of the International Labour Organization, one that we hold dear and sacrosanct, that principle is a principle that speaks to redressing, or let me say addressing, the imbalance, whether that imbalance is real or perceived, allowing workers to come together in any interrelation and interaction with employers. So that is maybe a synopsis of the climate and what we're doing in relation to what was referred to as the dominance of capital.
Madam Chair, I don't mean to scold my honorable friend. He said he's spoken at length on these matters previously. I hold the view that the honorable gentleman is the most silent, if that's correct grammar, of all labor ministers that we've ever had in this country, certainly in independent Barbados. And I don't think he has been speaking enough and speaking substantively enough to the pertinent issues around labor relations in Barbados, in the labor relations environment in Barbados. In responding to my query, he sort of said it in the context of COVID and the tensions brought about by uncertainty over job and uncertainty over the viability of businesses because of the COVID dynamics. But a lot of these things, Madam Chair, predate COVID and will still be with us after COVID. If nothing of substance is done, I'd like to know where in the minutes that we see any contemplation, any indicative attempt to address some of these issues. Now, we have still got problems with unionization in Barbados, what they call union busting, and businesses, especially foreign, and not only foreign owned, but some local businesses that don't want their people to become unionized. You talk collective bargaining agreements, but how viable and how important are they in a context of a culture where it is permitted that companies, because of who they are or because of what they have or because of what they bring to the table, will stop its employees from becoming part of a union or would want to bust up union activities. We've had recent cases of that even in recent days. There's a whole question of exploitation of the labor force in Barbados, particularly so women. And this is as perennial as the breeze over there that comes every day. It's been with us forever. And we've got to address that frontally. Yes, the phrase face it and fix it may be popular and intended well by those who use it, but there's some issues that we are not facing and fixing, and exploitation of our workforce, especially females in the workforce, in the work environment in Barbados is still a reality. Conditions of, not only conditions of service, but conditions under which people are forced to work, even in the public sector, even with respect to the Parliament of Barbados. These things are still very, very, very real. Pay levels, of course. So I don't think that we can restrict our analysis of this, our characterization of this to anything that has transpired in the last several months on the COVID and the dynamics which that has brought. It comes before that, will probably be here after that, and I think frontally, government with such a huge mandate as this one has an expected responsibility, a remit, to address some of these things in significant ways. I haven't heard anything substantial about efficacy of the employment rights tribunals, several payments tribunals, and things like this. We talk a lot about social partnership, but I am not too sure sometimes as to the genuineness of what comes out of social partnership interaction. So I am not happy with the characterization of the labor relations environment which I have heard, and I just want to put that on the record. I'm not saying this to in any way be critical of my honorable friend or reduce him or his image. I am saying this to encourage him, Madam Chair. I'll rest for now.
Want to go? No? Cynthia. Honorable Member for St. Michael Southeast.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, let me just say to the Minister of Labour, it was pleasing to hear the perspective which you've shared in relation to the importance that not only the unions, but certainly all stakeholders have to play in relation to labor relations in this country. And especially during this period coming out of a pandemic, I think the role of labour is even more important now than ever. Unlike the former Speaker, Leader of the Opposition, I, however, share the view that despite the fact that additional funds have not been added to the Ministry of Labour, it, however, must be made known that it is not so much the funds, but it is what you do with the funds when you get the funds. And I'm confident that with the funds that you have, it is really about the execution of the various projects under your ministry. And I want to just ask the first question, which relates to a program that was talked about very much when we came to office, the First Jobs Initiative. I think it has evolved into what is now the Job Start Plus program, or the National First Job Initiative. We've not heard anything much recently about it. Obviously, this was one of the programs that was touted by the administration and certainly by the Ministry of Labour as being able to assist, in particular, young people to get into the job market. And I'm concerned that obviously in a climate where we have so much rising numbers in terms of unemployment, and particularly amongst our youth, that we need to appreciate, I think, fully from the Ministry of Labour, what is going to happen in the coming months now that we've started to open back up the economy. What are the things that are going to be on the table with the Ministry of Labour to ensure that a number of those young people who want to take the opportunity to get into the workplace and to have the necessary skills with that first job and that opportunity to have that first job will now be afforded that opportunity and have something to look forward to. So that's my first question. What is happening with that particular program?
Before the Permanent Secretary and others of the team speak to that, I just want to say that once COVID, and it is not possible for us, maybe for others, but it's not possible for us to speak in an environment outside, and I refer maybe not to you, honorable member, but to some comment that I heard before. It is not possible to speak about what happened in the last year and what is happening at this point without reference to COVID-19. We believe, on our way to a great program and unfolding and executing a great program, this First Jobs program, which we've named Job Start Plus. And with the onset of the pandemic, then that became a matter that we had to some degree, not fully, reassess, because that was a time when there were closures, persons as in businesses were not able to have the young people engage in the way that they had anticipated prior to the COVID pandemic. We're pleased, though, that working with the Ministry of Finance, we have been able to secure the funding that we believe will allow us to move in a very significant way to have that program rolled out even as the economy opens up again and starts to grow. We realize that there are going to be constraints on the part of employers, and we are now better able to work with those employers to make sure that we are able to have a program that allows young people to get their foot into the door, to be able to get that first set of experience that employers so often ask for. People want young people to come to work, and they're asking them for 12 months of experience. Nobody gives them a chance. And we see this as more than job experience. We realize that this is, in quite a number of cases, going to mean the difference between hope and despair for a lot of young people. And we do not want young people to be moving toward despair. The research tells us that whenever they're, in normal circumstances, there's high youth unemployment, but it is even worse when there are crises like a pandemic in the context in which we are operating at this point. And so, just to say broadly that we are going to be able to be much more aggressive in the coming financial year because of the funding, and we've already started our approach to businesses to have them on board, but to continue that conversation because we never really stopped the conversation with our business partners. Permanent Secretary, would you want to add to that?
Thank you, Minister. For the financial year 2021-2024, we're looking at a target of 350 young persons to place in the Job Start program. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask Program Officer Boeing to expand and to speak to the outputs and how we are going to, and where we are, in this program at this time.
Chair, I'm Maureen Boyne, Program Officer with the Ministry. To date, from the period December 2019 until March 2020, we would have undertaken training for approximately 150 young persons. These persons would have been engaged in a 2-week training program, World of Work training, and we would have covered areas such as effective communication, resume writing, interview techniques, mock interviews, etc. And this was really a response to what employers were saying to us based on what they saw as young persons not quite transitioning well from the school environment into the working environment. As a result of the training that we undertook, and obviously, as Minister said, previously we were impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So at one point in time, we had about 43 young persons placed with 19 different employers, and that was up to December 2020. And obviously, since the previous shutdown, we would have saw a reduction in the numbers. We currently have about 20 persons placed under the program. Pre-COVID, the interest was very much there. Through our work in the ministry, we had made contact with over 200 employers. So the interest was definitely there. And I can say it was from a cross-section of sectors. You would have the manufacturing, the hotel industry, retail, wholesale, automotive industry, financial services. So the interest is still very much there, but obviously we've been impacted by COVID. So that's just a brief summary right now. Thank you.
Thank you to the team, and I do look forward to being able, through education as well, to work with you to strengthen certainly the rollout of that particular program, because it is, as you would appreciate, extremely important for us to be able to allow young people to transition from secondary school into the job environment. Now that brings me to my second question, which relates really to the public education, the awareness of labor and labor relations generally, industrial relations generally. And I say that because even as I've entered the Ministry of Education, obviously I've had my own challenges relating to unions and certainly relating to understanding all of the issues surrounding the various stakeholders in education. And I do feel that it is important that we start the conversation about industrial relations. What are rights and responsibilities of employers? What are the rights and responsibilities of employees as well at a younger age? And I'm just wondering if, in the similar vein that we are moving towards with financial literacy, if the Ministry of Labor has given thought to a type of program for within the schools where we could look at a measure within the curriculum that would allow us to start to create that awareness. Obviously, we have the opportunities through guidance counselors to be able to assist young people to make that transition. But I'm just curious as to the public relations, the exercise that is going to take place over the next couple of months. What are the plans in relation to certainly young people, but also to the wider public as you start to heighten the awareness about labor relations and rights and responsibilities?
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. The matter of educating our people, including our younger people, is a matter that we have had much discussion on and have actually started some work on, recognizing that we have to meet people where they are, in essence. And the use of social media is a significant part of what we have started to do with the webinars that we have done that are online and accessible, and what we plan to do as it relates to the use of other branches of social media like Instagram and Facebook. And I'll ask the Chief Labor Officer to speak some more to that educating of our people, including our younger people, as to their rights and responsibilities, as you put it, in the matter of what is expected in a workspace, in a workplace. How are they to operate? What are their rights and responsibilities?
Thank you, Minister. Madam Chair, I am Thank you, Minister. Madam Chair, I am Claudette Hope Greenwich, Chief Labor Officer Acting. And with regard to public education and training, including what would be done for young persons and at the secondary and perhaps even the primary school level, as would be appropriate for their age, the department through the ministry will continue its public education program, but in a different way over the course of this financial year. The traditional approach of having the in-classroom or in-room setting, that is pretty much abandoned for this year for the reasons that we know of, COVID, and as well bringing the training delivery into the new world, into the new century, where young persons are more amenable to training that's being delivered via electronic platforms in many ways. And also the adult population is also into having training delivered that way. Now, we will look at the industrial relations related training and the occupational safety and health related training. If we go with industrial relations first, what we propose to do and will do this year is to increase the number of electronically available training programs and sessions, which can be accessed by any worker anywhere, including those persons who may not be in the workforce at this time. And that would, of course, include the persons who are at school or in training institutions. We propose to have at least 4 full-scale webinars, maybe 2 hours duration, because electronically you can't go too long. We can't go for the half day that we would have normally, so about 2 hours, where those will be targeted at the employers. And similarly, 4 will be put on for the workforce and the young persons. And what we have found is that the webinars are particularly attractive across the board. And we do have some content that is there now on YouTube, in particular on the ministry's YouTube site. and those can be accessed. And we will do similar programs commencing in April of this year. And we also propose to have a sustained media presence during the course of this financial year, utilizing our traditional media through the radio, TVS, using the services of GIS, but also having content that is there for posterity, using the various social media platforms that we will have access to. With regard to industrial relations as well, there is a need to make sure that both employers and employees are equally seized with the information that relates to the IR landscape. And this financial year, we propose to have an online course that can be taken by just about anyone, and it will serve to provide persons with the basic information about some of the key facets of the labor legislation, ILO conventions and principles, established customs and practices where we don't yet have a legal framework to address certain topics, so that there's a good gauge on what is happening. And it is envisaged that at this point, it is something, if it does not occur this year, it can lead to certification later on, but persons will be, their participation will be acknowledged. So that is one route that we will go, or an additional route that we will go in when it comes to the industrial relations end of things. And there is a need, we recognize that, and we will address it. And that is where we will have at least once a month or every 2 months, something out in the media on an aspect of industrial relations, not necessarily waiting until something occurs, then to address it through the giving of information, but to have that sustained practice that I referred to earlier. With regard to occupational safety and health, since the onset of the COVID-19 situation, what has become glaringly obvious to us is that inextricable link between public health and occupational safety and health. And it is for that reason that there has been a stepped up focus on some aspects of occupational safety and health in this particular environment, but we cannot allow the traditional areas of focus to die away. So for example, safety and health management at the workplace level, and also the training that needs to be undertaken by employer and employee, so that everyone is fully cognizant of what our safety and health legislation requires. Now, as part of our programming for this year will be the observation of 2 major events. The World Day for Safety and Health, which is on the 28th of August, is an annually occurring day, and that is something that is promoted by the ILO, so World Day for Safety and Health. And this time around, in that the theme for the day addresses resilience and building in and building out relevant and meaningful safety and health systems, occupational safety and health systems. We will place some focus on that for the 28th. And we have also seen that there's a need to have some focus on smaller agencies, smaller entities, helping them to build out their occupational safety and health management systems. And when I say that, we are thinking specifically at this time of the relevance and meaning and purpose of occupational safety and health workplace, occupational safety and health committees. The second major plank for safety and health this year will come around in mid-year, around the end of June, early July, and that is the observing of Occupational Safety and Health Week, where there is usually, and this time around we anticipate an increase, there's usually a huge amount of buy-in by both employers and employees. This year we will be doing it virtually, so the subscriptions are anticipated to be much more, the reach will be much greater. But we will be looking at areas such as the same organization for organizing for safety and health. In addition to that, we'll be looking at indoor air quality as an area, and also It may seem strange to some persons, but violence and harassment, the occupational safety dimension of that, and that is in keeping and along the lines of the newest ILO Convention on Violence and Harassment in the World of Work, a convention to which Barbados contributed very significantly over the course of its development up to when it became a reality in 2019. Outside of that, or in addition to those two main planks for occupational safety and health, the program will continue. There is a heavy demand, which is sustained from the workers' organizations as well as the employers' organizations and individual entities, individual agencies for training and discussion using the services of the Occupational Safety and Health section of the department, and that will continue along with presenting webinars over the course of the financial year in similar vein to the industrial relations section.
If I may just conclude that intervention by recognizing what I think is an invitation to us on the part of the Honorable Member for St. Michael Southeast to partner with the Ministry of Education and maybe have an opportunity to focus in the school setting on sharing information that would be valuable for students as they seek to transition out of the schools. And if I'm correct, thank you very much for that offer, and we will be following up on it with you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for that understanding of where I was going, because I think it is important for the country to appreciate that the Ministry of Labour understands that the understanding of labor relations does not begin when you get the job. And I think it has to begin, as most other things do, from that nurturing stage of our schools. I don't think that everything has to be delivered in person, and I think this pandemic has shown us that. But equally, I think and you've been doing an excellent job with the training initiative and creating, working to create a number of online tutorials and videos that can assist Barbadians in their own time to be able to be exposed to various areas. So I think this period has shown us we can do different things. We don't have to do things in the ordinary way. And so I look forward to that engagement. Dr. Best certainly knows how to reach us. She's very familiar with the Ministry of Education, and therefore I'm sure that this is something that she can certainly help to pilot within the ministry in making sure that our curriculum reflects a knowledge of the rights and responsibilities of young people as they go into the world of work. The other point, just to follow on from the officer as well, was the issue of publicity in the workplace, and certainly allowing the ministry needs to rather take the lead on issues, particularly in this pandemic. And I say that because I have been hearing quite a lot of noise regarding no jab, no job. And I do feel that this is an area where there's been a lot of fear, there's been a lot of confusion created by employees across the island. Obviously, some of it may be more external, but of course, anything that happens external affects us internally as well. And so I do think that in settling the population about what that means, what are the rights of employees, what are the rights of employers, what does vaccination require of you, but equally, can an employer get rid of you or not engage you because you have not been vaccinated? I think these are real issues that average Barbadians are probably asking themselves. There may be uncertainties, and I do feel that now is the time for Ministry of Labour to maybe be proactive in helping to answer some of those questions, as opposed to waiting until we have scenarios where either employers make mistakes or equally employees are uncertain about the environment into which they are going into. But I look forward to that engagement with you. My final question relates to the budget that has been allocated for the Third Sector Commission. I know that there's about $197,000 that is included for the Third Sector Commission within the ministry. The intention, I gather, is to basically conduct a number of meetings with the National Third Sector Advisory Committee. I am therefore curious, given all that we hear about the third sector, their contribution to the economy, the impact certainly that COVID has had on them, because they've not escaped the difficulties that we've all experienced with COVID. Many of them are the persons who run these organizations are the persons who really help to take up the slack where government or other institutions may not be able to do so, helping whether it's the homeless or dealing with a number of social interventions, feeding people. And therefore, I am concerned that as we move forward for this next financial year, that we need to be clear as to the role that I think the Ministry of Labour envisages in relation to what that sector will do and how we will more formalize them as part of assisting government with its agenda. A number of the persons in the third sector have obviously expressed concerns about their own financial resources, the ability of even a lot of the elderly people who would have assisted with the programs, who now, because of their own chronic illnesses, have not been able to come out and to basically fully participate. So they have been pretty much hard struck. But I'm hopeful that as we move forward, we can have some attempts to do some capacity building, maybe take this time to strengthen the organizations, make sure that they're properly regulated, and perhaps even, as has been suggested, I believe, by members of the third sector, even looking at the possibility of some kind of help desk within the Ministry of Labour, where persons may be in a position to, instead of going to different ministries, trying to see how they can help a particular ministry, having a central location, almost like a clearinghouse, that those entities can visit and basically put forward their proposals, and then those proposals are forwarded on to the respective ministries. Because I gather that in a lot of cases, what seems to happen is that the information gets lost somewhere in the system, or it goes to the wrong ministry, and then it is not fully taken up within the time frame that they would have wanted to offer their services. The other issue, I think, with this sector is that I think the Ministry of Labour also needs to be looking at deepening the relationship in terms of contractual arrangements with the sector. A number of these organizations have proven track records. They've been doing excellent work. And I do feel that if they're offering an excellent service, then perhaps we need to partner with them, certainly not only as a revenue generating stream for them, but certainly being able to allow us as government to deliver services effectively rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts in terms of what this committee and commission is intended to do, and what the future for the third sector will look like through the Ministry of Labour.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. The third sector, I'm really happy that you raised this, because this is something that has taken much of our attention over the past months and couple of years, and it is an area that we recognize is vitally important for the country. And I mentioned initially in the opening remarks the fact that the third sector has been involved with country development, not always in a positive way. If I go back to the very beginning of what would have been the settlement of the 1600s, and that is in relation to faith-based organizations, but there has been involvement. So whether it was back in those days the matter of education, there has been that involvement, and our ministry is tasked with helping third sector organizations to maximize their influence, to maximize their effectiveness. I'm going to allow the Permanent Secretary and another officer to be able to respond, but what I'll say just in a broad response before we get more specific responses, the matter of financing, funding is critical. And what we are doing, right now we have a draft cabinet paper, which is with 2 ministries as we speak, awaiting comment. That cabinet paper seeks to establish a framework. And the reason why I want to say this, because there is sometimes a perception of government, and this does not fall into that perception. I think we'll understand after I say it. Our approach is not to take over third sector organizations, not to tell them what to do, but to be facilitators. To facilitate these organizations, civil society organizations, faith-based organizations, CBOs, NGOs, assisting them in becoming, as far as the public is concerned and as far as funding agencies are concerned, more credible. Because I agree with you, Honorable Member, that one of the limiting factors we have found with third sector organizations is capacity to generate the funding that is necessary to execute the very good work, which is often in the minds of the founder and founders of these organizations. So the building of the credibility, establishing a register where we can say to the world, these are the objectives and aims of this organization. They have submitted their financial reports. As far as we're concerned, they are following what they indicated that they were going to be following. We will be working with other sections of government because there are issues like anti-money laundering and terrorism financing, those matters that have to be dealt with that are not likely going to be dealt with within our ministry, but we intend to be that ministry that will coordinate so that when all the work is done, we can say to the world, these are organizations that are credible and that deserve your support. Beyond that, and I was involved in another very important matter yesterday, so I was not able to hear the presentation yesterday morning. The whole matter of renewable energy, Cabinet has taken a decision that a percentage of that renewable energy pie, so to speak, will be reserved for the third sector. That will allow the third sector, as the sector can gather resources, as it can leverage the undertaking from government, it will allow those organizations to participate in the renewable energy space and thereby create revenue for their organizations. The mechanics of that are to be determined, but we've already started conversations with some third sector organizations, not very many. We have to intensify that going forward. We have started discussions with the ministry responsible for energy, and so we'll be moving forward with that because we recognize that the whole matter of revenue certainty has to be addressed. As you said, Honorable Member, that has been one of the issues at this point. Businesses struggling to stay afloat, so not able to contribute to third sector organizations maybe as they either are accustomed to or as they want to. And that is a matter that we are looking into. But
Just to remind you, Honorable Member, your answers should be 5 minutes long.
I'll ask the Permanent Secretary to speak in some more detail to that.
Thank you, Minister. In relation to the third sector, we have programs, and I'm going to allow the responses to come from the DPS Howell. I'm going to the program coordinator Farley, and the director of BEX, because yes, we recognize that the third sector, and the minister speaks about the third sector every single day, 24 hours a day, and how important the third sector is. And the Minister of Education spoke about the contractual arrangements, and I think the Minister elaborated on that, where we have a draft cabinet paper outlining what will come out of that paper. We also looked at setting up a secretariat, but we were told we had to take it out of our estimates. So we are going to bring it back again, looking at a structure of how we are going to relate to and with the third sector. But I will hand over to the DPS and Coordinator Farley and the Director of BEX to speak on the programs that we are going to have going forward with the third.
Good morning, Marva Howell, Deputy Permanent Secretary. As Minister alluded to, yes, we are trying to create a one-stop shop where the third sector organizations will be able to, in terms of their registration, in terms of getting access to finances, access to concessions, and in terms of creating that regulatory framework where they'll become more healthy and vibrant, because we do recognize the reach that third sector organizations have within the various communities. Because when you think in terms of the limited resources that government has at this present moment, or even before, the third sector organizations are able to give a voice to those that believe that they do not have a voice. And if we want to create a just and fair society, it is important that the most vulnerable in the society must be able to have some persons representing them. In terms, while we look towards creating that framework, because that paper was done since 2019, and as the minister alluded to, we are awaiting comments from two other ministries. We are looking in terms of capacity building within third sector organizations, because you will have some that are in a lot stronger position financially than others, and in terms of the numbers. So for this current financial year, we have done workshops in terms of governance and proposal writing. We are working in conjunction with some international organizations, primarily within the UN system, UNDP, and then also with IDB, where they have provided facilitators to assist doing the presentations. Governance is a very wide area, so we will continue with that when the new financial year starts. In terms of proposal writing, as I said before, government does not have all the resources that we can give, the technical support. So if they know when international aid or development organizations have funds and they can submit proposals, at least they can be considered for some of the funding. So we also focus in terms of financial management, and we have been speaking with the third sector organizations to make sure that what we recognize as a need is really a need. We are also looking, and once we are able to get that third sector secretariat set up, and they'll be encouraged to register, because we do not want where, as the minister alluded to, the issue of money laundering, where some unscrupulous agencies may come to try to launder money through those third sector organizations. So those are some of the things that we are looking at for the upcoming financial year, to continue capacity building.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Minister. I have no further questions.
Honorable member for St. James Central.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Honorable member, I want to begin by saluting you and congratulating you for the work you do in the stewardship of your ministry. And actually, my intervention really is because of a sense that you need to be given an opportunity to speak with some clarity of policy and certainty of programmatic intent on a matter that was perhaps, for the purposes of this parliament, a throwaway comment by the leader of the opposition, but I've been around this business long enough to know that a damaging and unctuous headline can come about from what might be the most apparently casual of comments. Specifically, Minister, the question of union busting. And perhaps I should begin by saying, as a minister responsible for business should say, what his position is on a matter. And I take the perspective that, and I tend to inform myself by statistics. I read things like the ILO publications and the US Bureau of Labor stats when I have the opportunity. And I think it is clear to see that union members have higher wages and generally better conditions, and a happier workforce is brought about by those circumstances, and therefore it is usually a workforce that is more willing to sacrifice, and I think that is better for business. But there's a different perception out there, and that perception is that higher wages and emphasis on better conditions or increased safety measures and better benefits for employees generally all come at a cost, and that cost is an imposition to be carried by the business, and the temptation consequently is to interfere with organized labor in the facilities, so that what would be a casual comment about union busting really does speak to the heart of a disparity of opinion, in my judgment, in Barbados. Now, Minister, I also am aware that there is another form of emerging business. I do not know that it exists here, but there is a form of emerging business in the United Kingdom and in the United States of America, where HR firms, human resource firms, specifically offer consultation on how to disrupt organized labor with the goal of keeping companies union-free. And you would imagine, Minister, that that could be a very deleterious and difficult thing for this country to have to deal with if it was to take root in areas of the Barbados economy, for example, the construction sector and the tourism sector, and those larger and more important sectors of enterprise in Barbados. Now, the question that I have for you, therefore, is, do you, as Minister, see any evidence of any feature of either overt or covert, overt or subtle discouragement of workers from participating in union activities in this country? Is there evidence of that? And secondly, if in fact that evidence does exist, then what policy action or policy measures do you envisage it being necessary to take?
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. A very good question, and an area that this ministry is very focused on. Now, this ministry encourages what is referred to as solidarity. So I spoke earlier to the matter of collective bargaining. And in all of our interventions with businesses, we speak to that as a philosophical underpinning, a policy perspective of government and of this ministry. That is to say, workers have to be allowed together to negotiate on their behalf, led by their union, or whoever else they want to represent them, and that is not to be stifled in any way. Now, let me answer the specific question as I move on, conscious of the 5 minutes that I have. The question was, are we seeing attempts to reduce either the impact or the ability of unions to function, or of workers to organize themselves? My straight response, I have not done research, but there are a number of things that have come to my attention that says to me that there is an attempt to reduce the impact of unions in workplaces. I'm not saying that that is pervasive. And to be quite honest, Honourable Member, I am a little bit less interested in the headlines. But I want to be accurate. I am not saying that it is pervasive, but I'm saying clearly that I have seen evidence of an attempt to reduce the effectiveness of workers' organizations in this country. I have also seen the efforts of HR advisors in this regard. And it is not a matter that is left only to developed countries and those large organizations that operate in those countries. We are seeing it here as well. And I'll give a little bit of background as to one of the reasons why we are seeing some of our HR advisors going in that direction. I'll also tell you that there are HR managers, and they are our clients, but I'm going to be very straight on this matter. We're also seeing HR managers who should be standing on behalf of workers, but who, because HR over the years has struggled to be seen as legitimately a part of the management structure. Whereas you see CEOs and financial controllers they are known to be part of the management structure. HR managers have been fighting for that recognition, and some of them, again, I am not speaking to pervasiveness because I do not have that information, but I've seen enough to know that at least some of them have taken the approach that they have to be the toughest people in the organization in order to prove their worthiness. We also have situations where they may not have that in their minds, but management and sometimes owners place them in that position. So whereas all managers are supposed to be responsible for developing their workers and being part of disciplinary processes, the HR people are often sent out to do the nasty work. And that is a fact in Barbados. Now, as it relates to government and this ministry's position, whenever it comes to our attention, we are very clear in our approach to it, but we realize that, and I think the Honourable Member for St. George North mentioned it earlier. I didn't have enough time to go into all of those things, but the matter of legislation and the strengthening of legislation is a matter that we've been addressing applying many hours to. The Employment Rights Act is one of those acts that we are working on strengthening. As a matter of fact, we've completed one stage of the review, and we'll soon be coming to the trade union movement and employers organizations to talk through, because we've been working through some of the comments that have come to us from them, as well as some of the issues that we ourselves have determined need to be addressed in that legislation. We've also put into place the Employment Prevention of Discrimination Act. That speaks to a number of areas where we can now have the weight of legislation enforcing the positions that we share orally or verbally. But we have zero tolerance when it comes to union busting, when it comes to preventing the work of trade unions, when it comes to limiting in any way how workers can organize in furtherance of their own interests. And I just want to say, because you spoke about the benefits that workers have worked hard for over the years and how it is seen often as a cost to a company. And I just want to say this to this Honorable Chamber, but also to the public. A contented worker is a more productive worker. And my encouragement to businesses is not to engage in bad hiring and then penalize your good workers, because that is what often happens. People do not pay enough attention to their hiring systems, and then because of the challenges that lack of attention has engendered, then take it out on everybody in the work situation. I'm calling on employers to pay more attention to their hiring, and after that, pay a lot of attention to training and development. Your people are your primary ambassadors. Your people are the ones who will make or break your business. And so I just would want to share those thoughts as a response to you, Honourable Member.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Philip West.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Honourable Member, in your opening statements, you would have mentioned that the ministry helps in assisting people to find employment. And under Program 420, Sub-Program 0422, there's a mention in the sub-program statement about the Barbados Liaison Service in Canada and in the USA. What I'm asking is there any intention on the part of the ministry to expand the programs? Because Barbadians would be well aware of the farm labor program and the hotel workers programs. If you have, if you can share that with us, and if not, are you intending to expand both the programs themselves and also the territories within which you seek that employment? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question, Honourable Member. I'll ask the Director of BEX to respond to that.
I think the mic is off. We heard nothing.
Yes. Are you hearing?
We're not. I think so. Speak.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I was saying that we do plan to expand both in terms of the areas that we have workers opportunities being sourced
please?
in.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you give us your name and post, please?
The name is Yvette Walcott Dennis, Director of the Barbados Employment and Career Counseling Service.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So we are looking to expand in the areas of the various countries. Yes, we have the Miami office where we look to source jobs in the USA, and we have Canada where most persons will know that we have the hotel, as you did say, and the agricultural sectors. But we are also looking at expanding into the UK. Currently, we are preparing to send some workers to the UK. We started a program last year, but it was seriously impacted by the COVID, where there was a pilot program in the agricultural sector. We are preparing to send workers, additional workers to the UK this month and next month. We're hoping that we will have the first few persons going up to the UK. In addition to that, we are hoping to work through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the various missions that we have around the world to reach out to seek and source employment in those areas, in wherever those missions are. And in terms of the sectors, we're looking in Miami and in Canada as well to expand into the equine industries. We also are looking at sourcing employment in the areas of green technology. So we're looking at the skilled trades, and we're looking at other areas, which is where we're working with other units in the ministry, the Manpower Research Unit, where we're looking to do research to find those areas where there are skills in demand, to see that we can get our liaison officers and our partners throughout the diaspora and wherever we can have persons, for instance, farmer workers who went through the ministry and are living and working in these various jurisdictions, where we can work with them to get our, to source employment and to get our Barbadians traveling to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Sorry, Minister. Go ahead, we weren't able to hear.
Okay, what I want to just add very quickly to what the Director of BEX has indicated. When we met, and this ministry is always open to good ideas, and we welcome any that come by way of this exercise today. While we were before the Ministry of Finance defending our estimates as part of the process, the matter of moving into areas that could see exchanges in what are called the professional areas, and in some cases more academic type areas, was put on the table, and it was actually by the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central. And we have taken that on board, and the Director of BEX is also pursuing those opportunities. The plans are in very embryonic stages, but we've recognized and we've accepted that Barbados can benefit from our people being further exposed to different technology, different ways of doing things. We can benefit. We can also share some of our best practices with others, but we are pursuing opportunities over and above those areas that would be considered technical areas. And when I say over and above, I mean apart from. There is no stratification as far as we're concerned with different jobs or job types, but apart from the traditional hospitality, agriculture, and other what are considered technical areas, we're also moving into other areas that are considered by some to be what are called other professional areas as well.
Thank you. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, ma'am. Just a couple questions. Where are we? If I may ask the minister, if he is at liberty to say at this stage, where are we with plans on minimum wage legislation? I hope I didn't miss anything that might have been said on that earlier. And what is the true unemployment level in Barbados? What is the true unemployment level in Barbados at this stage? And against the backdrop of both those questions, the third question, government has signaled an intention to address the issue of the Barbados population by reference to immigration policy. And does the minister anticipate, does he have any thoughts, he and his team, on the matter of the tension between a policy to increase the Barbados population by reference to immigration and the labor demands and the unemployment levels in Barbados?
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. The first question in relation to minimum wage legislation, we have published a notice of intention to make a minimum wage order. We have also published a draft minimum wage order. We are right now coming to the end of the 40-day period that is the minimum allowed by the legislation for that, both the notice of intention and the draft order to be in the public domain, inviting comments or any challenges to the idea. The few that we have received are with the minimum wage board, and that is also a matter of following the process outlined by the law. We intend, as we've said before, to make an order that will become effective April 1st, 2021, and we are on course for that. The 40-day period ends just around the middle of this month, well, in a few days, and then we have the responses from the minimum wage board, after which we go back to cabinet, and cabinet then agrees to whatever recommendation or adjust whatever recommendation we from the ministry make to the cabinet being that decision-making body. The new minimum wage and any sectoral minimum wages will become effective 1st of April 2021. The honourable member asks for the unemployment figure for Barbados at this point. I do not have that number, and I will not attempt to guess the number. The matter of, but let me say on that, as far as this ministry is concerned, any unemployment is a matter to be addressed. And whereas I am not able to give you what the actual unemployment number is at this point, what I will say to you is that what I will say to the Honourable Chamber is that all the work of this ministry responsible for labour and social partnership relations, all of our work is geared toward finding employment opportunities. We often say in our management meetings, our responsibility is to prepare Bajans for work and find work for Bajans. And that is an informal way of how we set about our various tasks. The matter of population policy, though, in the context of unemployment, which is where the honourable member, I think, is how he is couching the ultimate question. This government, including this ministry, plans forward. And so what we do now is not just based on now, but is based on where we expect our country to be as we move forward. We are aggressively pushing a growth agenda as a government, and our role in this plan to grow the economy is to make sure that workers are available, motivated, equipped. Now, all of those areas where we need to have people, those are not matters necessarily addressed by the ministry. So, for example, there's a ministry that is responsible for education, technical, and vocational training. But our responsibility is to work with, to interface with that ministry to make sure that based on our research, we have people who are able to be ready, willing, and able to go in existing areas and in new areas. The matter of population policy is something determined by government generally, but we do know that as the economy grows, there is going to be the need for additional persons with skills that we already know of, additional persons with new skills. And our responsibility as a ministry, while the ministry responsible for immigration and cabinet works on immigration policy, while the Population Commission and the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Investment works to craft that policy, our responsibility is to recognize that we have and we intend to have a growing economy, an economy that will be requiring additional numbers of workers and ensuring that we have a worker force developed and ready to be able to take advantage of those opportunities.
Ma'am, just one more question, if it is a question. I'm finished, really. I thank the Minister and his team for the presentations. But if the Minister of Labour can't tell me what the unemployment level in Barbados is, could he tell me who in government can, please? The department responsible for the numbers is the statistical department, which is located in the Ministry of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment.
Honorable Member for St. Michael South.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And thank you, Minister, and to your team as well for your presentation this morning. You know, it is obvious that the world is changing, and in that regard, we all have to change with it. But I hold the view that nobody should find themselves in a position where you're reacting to something that you should see coming. And that there are a number of things in the environment of work that we saw coming. We knew, for example, that technology, e-commerce, automation would expose significantly a lot of the working class, worker class, and that therefore we had to respond to it. Of course, now with physical distancing in the workplace, that is also going to expose a number of working class and a number of people in the worker class, because some employers would argue that they just don't have the space as a reason to displace workers. My concern is, as it was last year, I'm raising it again before I ask a question specific on the estimates, is that the idea that workers go to work every day. You have to get there at a particular time, you have to take lunch at a particular time, you have to leave at a particular time, but your employer is telling you that you are self-employed. And this idea that you are self-employed, almost a contract worker, is now being used as a cannon in the arsenal of the unsavory to displace a lot of the working class. And I hear it in my constituency all the time, people who felt they were workers and are being told now that they are self-employed. And as a consequence, they then would not have the NAS paid. And we've seen that all of the people in Barbados now realize how important it is to have NAS. And I think we have to really stir up a lot of the employers when it comes to this. I wanted to know what the ministry was doing to protect the vulnerable. And our working class, as you can see now, is extremely vulnerable. The second question, Minister, pertains to, there were a number of questions that were asked before in different areas, so I won't go over all, but the second question pertains to the GIVE program. I see here we have $82,000 for GIVE, and GIVE, as far as I recall, was to improve worker attitude, and there are some who would suggest that in Barbados that is one of the areas that we certainly have to work on as a service-driven sector, and $82,000 seems somewhat slight, and therefore I would be keen to hear what we are doing exactly in the GIVE program to do that. The Job Start program, of course, it was discussed, but it was in the estimates itself on the head 0025, sub-program 0025, you're 1.5 million. Over half of that, almost half is in professional fees and another $100,000 in contingencies. So just to explain how that program, because that program is so important, I think, going forward to what we have to do as a government to bring young people back into the workforce. Just to explain how those funds are being spent. I had other questions, but I think in the interest of time, I will leave it there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable Member. I will allow my team to, I made a promise to you last year in particular, and I'm going to allow the team to speak to some of the matters. But I just want initially an initial comment. The matter of what is sometimes referred to as casualization, what you refer to as businesses having people employed, and you listed the characteristics, but then suggesting that those workers are self-employed, subcontractors, is a matter that has been taking our attention, and it is one that we feel very, very, very strongly in this ministry about. After I speak to the other two, I'll ask the Chief Labor Officer to say some more about what we'll be doing in that regard, because I agree with you, and we all agree with you, that it makes no sense knowing that something is around the table, around the corner, sorry, and ignoring it and waiting until it hits you in the face before you start to deal with it. And so even as we spoke within the ministry to the matter of raising the minimum wage, we have already started to suspect that one of the responses could very well be what you have explained. And so the matter of the inspections and all those things, the Chief Labor Officer will speak to when I've completed. In relation to GIVE, an officer will also speak to that, but just let me say that just like we say to those in the private sector in relation to managers versus human resource professionals, the work of engendering great attitudes among your workers is not the responsibility of any single department. And so we say to employers, your HR manager is not the one responsible for creating good attitudes among your employees. Every manager in every employing institution has a responsibility to do that. GIVE is to top up what is being done across the public sector. Hence the reason for what may be considered not a very significant amount, but we realize that we have to work more closely with ministries and departments in the public sector. Our responsibility is to top up and to make sure that people do what they're supposed to do in terms of having that great environment for people to work. And I'll allow the Permanent Secretary after that to speak to Job Start Plus. But first, the matter of casualization.
Thank you, Minister. My mic is on. It's on. Thank you, Minister, Madam Chair. The issue of casualization is one that has been receiving some attention, not just this year, but yes, it was raised last year as well. Has been receiving some attention. Now, as far as the offer and acceptance is concerned, the employer-employee, there's the offer, there's the acceptance, there's the formation of the contract. Now, what is important is for us agreeably to be able to go to that training that we spoke of earlier and the awareness that we want to raise, so that employers, if they don't know, and employees, if they don't know or consider that they're being taken advantage of, would know and be aware of those things that constitute the employer-employee relationship. Now, the Employment Rights Act helps to some extent in that it gives, in one of the later schedules, some guidance on the terms and the factors that are to be considered when you're looking at the existence of a contract of employment, a contract of service. So we do have that to rely on. In addition, the inspection process is very important, and we have had those challenges, which we will not dwell on because the COVID situation will be around for some time. So at the right time, we need to get back to the inspection schedule, where we would then be able to have the officers going out, the labor officers this is, and supplemented by the safety and health officers where that becomes necessary, to interact with the workers and employers where they are on the work site, to gather information to find out exactly what is happening in the workplace. Now, as far as the casualization is concerned, awareness on the part of the employees is very important. As the lesser of the two in the power relationship, that's why it takes on that level of importance. The employers generally would know where they have offered a contract of or a contract for. But if we look at the planks that we would need to consider, it would be the inspection process, the relevance and getting the training and the awareness out to the employees, also relying on the legislation. And we also need to be mindful that we can't speak here, or I can't speak here for the NIS, but there is a role for the NIS as well when it comes to determining whether it's contract of or contract for. So along with NIS, we can work in tandem, and we do on occasion as the need arises to look to see how we can best handle that situation. But agreeably, the inspection process is one of the better places to start.
If we may just interject at this point to speak to something that we have more recently started to attract our attention in this particular area, and it has to do with a piece of legislation called the Public Contracts Labor Clauses Act. And what we've realized is that this very small but very critical piece of legislation has not been paid enough attention to, and this is particularly in relation to, well, it is in relation to government contracts and the responsibility to ensure that those companies that are the recipients of government contracts adhere to good industrial relations policy. And so we are actually preparing, in the process of preparing a paper for our cabinet, because we believe that this act, it may need a little bit of strengthening, but it needs absolute enforcement to make sure that especially those companies that are benefiting from the public purse adhere to good IR practices and do not put workers who are really employees, because much of that has already been settled by the courts, and treat them as self-employed for their own selfish and narrow benefit.
I have a question. I'm glad the Honorable Member for St. Michael South brought it up, because I am aware now of an existing program within government that there's an argument between the contract of and contract for services. And I'm a bit uncomfortable with it, where you have people they're told when to come to work, they're given uniforms, they're given badges, they're told where to go, when to start. And I see that as they should not be considered as self-employed. Is this something that we are seeing within government? I know of at least one case. Are you telling me that this should be stopped, that contract should be rewritten? No?
What I'm saying is that the information should be brought to the attention of the Office of the Chief Labor Officer so that at least a preliminary determination can be made. I say preliminary only because this is a matter that has been the subject of litigation and ruling by the courts, but we do know that every case hinges on the actual circumstances, so that once we are able to have within the ministry some idea of the facts surrounding the case, then we are able to investigate. And the Office of the Chief Labor Officer has certain responsibilities and certain powers to make sure that people are not treated in a way other than they should be treated according to law. And that applies across the board. It doesn't matter who the employer is.
Thank you.
On the matter of GIVE and Job Start Plus, I think the Honourable Member for St. Michael South would want to hear some answers to those parts of his question. So, Permanent Secretary.
I would allow the Deputy Permanent Secretary to respond to GIVE, and then P.O. Boeing or Watson would explain the $680,000 on the 226, which has been queried.
Good morning again. We in the ministry do recognize the importance of the GIVE program, because especially at this juncture of our economy and society, if we are to build back better, we have to encourage all workers, not only those within the public service, but within all sectors, to be able to give a level of service where then we'll be able to achieve and sustain a competitive advantage. In terms of because right now, especially if I look in terms of the public service or in terms of society, everything that we've going through, Minister alluded earlier to that there's some tension within our country at this moment. So within the public service, in terms of building trust and having a level of commitment where you recognize that you are not only a provider of a service, but you are also a client or a consumer, it is important that you know in terms of how to deliver and how to understand the appropriate standards of behavior that would be acceptable in all businesses. The money may seem small. GIVE would have started back in around 2004, 2005, and we believe after roughly 16 years of its implementation that we should use the time to revise the program. Revise it to make sure that as we build back better, that we are offering providing the areas that should be covered, that all employees within Barbados would be willing to give that service, regardless whether you're giving that service to a tourist or to a local. So we will spend the time engaging our social partners and workers in terms of the needs, developing the appropriate toolkits, developing the age-appropriate messages that we would promote via social media. We also recognize that in terms of service excellence, that should not only be at the level of the worker, but if we really want to change what is happening in society, we also have to start with the children. So we are going to revisit the school program. We have had some discussions with some of the principals, and we want to be able to include the schools where everybody recognizes the importance of service excellence, having great attitudes initiatives. So basically, we are spending time revising the program, developing the toolkits so that when we roll back out in terms of once we've agreed on what is the right process, we'll be able to actually start offering some of the workshops and recognizing now that some of the workshops will be done virtually as opposed to face-to-face.
Honorable Member for St. Thomas?
Chair, Honorable Chair, could we have the response
Sure, okay, go ahead.
on Job Start Plus? I think that's an important response.
Go ahead.
Charity Program Unit. In terms of the professional services that is requested for the Job Start Plus program, it was really because we recognized that the ministry has certain capacity
I'm sorry, ma'am,
constraints.
your mic was out when you were introducing yourself. I apologize.
Sorry about that. Erica Watson with the Human Resource Development Program.
Thank you.
So we have certain capacity limitations in terms of the current staffing being involved in other initiatives. Additionally, the program has to address the diverse needs of the young people that we're targeting. And we have certain needs for expertise that is not going to be typically included in the ministry staff complement. So the professional service, we have included career guidance counselors, for example, where, well, yes, in the Barbados Employment Career Counseling Service, there are persons who could offer that career guidance and counseling, and we have done capacity building to support that. There are other things that they will be involved in, and to meet the target of 350, we have to basically train at the minimum about 500 or so to have a large enough pool of persons to go out into the workplace. And we have over 1,000 persons pre-registered, so to offer career guidance to them, we will need additional support there. We also included money for literacy and numeracy training because we recognize that that is a deficiency that some young people may have. Statistically, we have in our labor statistics about 30% of the labor force do not have any certification, and that's usually tied to the same deficiencies of literacy and numeracy. We've observed it in the terms of the young persons that we would have interacted with already in the program, and we want to provide some support there, and we have coined it on the adult literacy initiative. So that professional services budget include having persons to assist there to offer this literacy training, and because if you use, we have a target of at least 100, but it may be more. And that is something that even with these small class sizes and so on, we'll need a large number of facilitators for this training to deliver that number. We also have money in for the World of Work training, which we make mandatory for the young persons who are going into the workplace. Basically, we recognize that they're not necessarily prepared for it. So we spend the 2 weeks, as Ms. Bowen previously mentioned, doing some training. And again, we have been utilizing the staff of the ministry, but we recognize to meet the large training numbers that will be required to achieve the target, we will have to reach out to external persons to assist in this capacity. We also wanted to offer soft skills training outside of the 2 weeks that we believe will be required to go into the workplace initially. As they work, we get feedback from the employers in terms of certain deficiencies, certain skills, gaps, and so on. We want to be in a position to address that by having training sessions. For example, one of the things that kept coming up is customer service, and getting additional training in that. And one of the things that we ask employers is to agree to that they will release the placements for these kind of training opportunities. So we included that so that we could have this training available to build their skills, to make them not only ready for the placement they're in, but to make them overall more employable for the future. We also included psychosocial counseling. We don't have those expertise in the ministry. It's not something typical in the ministry, so we have to outsource. And in a situation where, as a placement with an employer, there is observations that there are certain issues going on, or even in terms of when we meet them in training and the career guidance and counseling, and we see that they need that support, the ministry wants to be in a position to help them and get them that counseling, to give them the kind of emotional support that they may need to really really go into the workplace. So that is why the professional service for is the $680,000.
And Chair, if I could just, because I'm very, very conscious that the Honorable Member for St. Michael South is concerned about the program and the amount there. Just let me maybe sum up to say, given all that you've heard, all that's been shared by Ms. Watson, that $680,000, Madam Chair and Honorable Member, should really be seen as an investment in our young people. There are significant challenges that our young people are facing, and this ministry has determined that we cannot just release them to employers. There are certain gaps that we must address. I use the word investment because after they've completed those 48 weeks, approximately 1 year of getting experience, they are going to be very much better placed to be effective and productive citizens of this country.
Thank you very much, Minister. Just to say, basically that I know that the ministry has been working very diligently. I mean, I often joke with you, Minister, that the Minister of Health may be the one before the cameras, but I know that COVID has also had a lot of impact on the work of the Ministry of Labor, and that you in particular have been an extremely busy minister. So I want to thank you, and particularly for the explanation and the preparation of the young people for the world of work. Thank you.
Honorable Member for St. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, honorable members and ladies and gentlemen. I shall make mine brief because one or two of the areas have been touched already, but I want to take this opportunity to highly commend the Honorable Minister and his team for the services that they have extended in this most difficult period of our history. For some, it is the first time in 80 years that we have seen such a devastating impact on the people and the lives here in this country with COVID. And I even call COVID a monster, I must tell you, because it has unfolded before us in Barbados. Tomorrow is 1 year, and there seems to be no abating of what is happening. However, it has been a difficult challenge, not only for the Honorable Minister, but for any government and a people as a whole. I just want to find out then from the Honorable Minister and his team, what kind of new approaches are they planning to take when we look at how COVID has caused us all to be now living in more or less a virtual world where the technology is really being infused and we are now working from home. And I want to find out what plans there are, if any, thus far from the Honorable Minister and his team in relation to looking towards that 24-hour work service that we know is happening in other jurisdictions. I know there are challenges. We see our clogged roads. We know children are left unattended and senior citizens, and so I would like to know if there are any further plans with the minister and even the tripartite group to be able to look at the 24-hour day and the possibility of us looking towards it at some time in the future. And I'll just have one more query after, unless, ma'am, you will wish me to raise it at the same time.
That's all right. That's fine.
Okay, thank you so much. Oh, the other one then is bugbear, and we see in our newspapers almost every day persons, advertisements being placed in the media and in other areas of the media, and it is asking for a work permit for persons to do some of the most simple jobs you could ever imagine. But we have Barbadians here, especially in the tourism sector, where there are Barbadians who are extremely well trained and skilled. They're professionals. And it seems to me as though some of the employers are seeking to get non-nationals to carry out duties that Barbadians can. And this is no negative feeling towards non-nationals, it must indicate, because at this time in our history, we must be able to embrace others. But why are we overlooking Barbadians who have the skills to ask for a work permit to bring in people who will do the work and have our people unemployed? I think it is really something we should look at as a people, and the Immigration Department must continue to work in relation to that particular aspect of concerns. It is being, a lot of it you're hearing on the social media. And the final little piece, question is, well, how are we planning in relation to service delivery? Doing business in Barbados, and I am extremely disappointed in what is happening not only in the public sector, but in the private sector, where a lot of societal values that we developed, especially when we looked at knowing that the customer is always right statement, as young people growing up, the customer service has really fallen to a level that frightens me in all sectors. And I just want to find out from the Honorable Minister and his team what plans they have in helping with training and preparation, and of course the government doing its part, because we talk about public sector reform and so on, but when people answer phones, when you go for treatment, or for medical care, or service in the supermarket, or even on schools, compounds, and so on, the treatment that is meted out mostly to persons is really very unacceptable. It is haughty, it is disrespectful, it is a kind of pompous approach, it is maltreatment. And not all is, but I'm saying we're going on the negative side, and I'm asking the Honorable Minister with his team to indicate to us what plans they have in their business this year to be able to help with the training and a compilation of private and public sector going together to be able to eliminate that kind of maltreatment that a lot of customers meet on a daily basis. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I'll have, excuse me, the Chief Labour Officer will speak a bit to the matter of the new work environment and new work systems and structures. What I would want to say, just as a overarching statement in response to a couple of the things. One is that as it relates to work permits, that is a matter addressed by the Ministry of responsible for immigration. However, we have a responsibility to assist the Ministry responsible for immigration in this matter. One of the areas of deficiency that we are actually in the process of, let me use a good Bajan term, sorting out, is the matter of being able to match potential workers with opportunities. And how we've been attempting to do this over the years just cannot fly anymore. This is not a pen and paper or a computer and printer matter anymore. This needs some technology behind it to drive it. And at this point, we are actually awaiting a quotation. We've had a presentation. The Ministry included the Ministry of Education, Technical and Vocational Training. It included the National Transformation Initiative and ourselves. We are awaiting a quotation because we will need to get approval for a system that those ministries and departments can all be a part of, that will allow us effectively to know who is out there, what they're willing to do, and then be in a position to respond to any outreach from the ministry responsible for immigration to make sure, for example, that unless it is a tree that we don't know of, that there is no attempt to bring in a tree climber to climb a coconut tree or to climb any other tree in Barbados, when we got people who climb them all the time and sometimes take stuff that's not theirs, who climb it very quickly and quite easily. That is one that I remember seeing. But we have a responsibility, and we are equipping ourselves to make sure that we are able to respond effectively to any questions from the ministry responsible for immigration. But the ministry responsible for immigration has the primary responsibility where that is concerned. And like I said earlier, our job is to make sure that we find work for the people who are here. Now, so that is the matter of work permits. I probably should also say that there is another side, and I don't want to dilute what I think the question was in relation to jobs that could be done by people who are already here. We also have to realize that, and I said this in my opening, the matter of skills transfer. We need to be able to learn new skills, either by going overseas and immersing ourselves in other environments, or by having people come here and share of their own expertise with us. In both cases, there needs to be an intentional approach to the process. It can't be that somebody just advertises, brings somebody in, even if it is a skill that we don't have. If it is a skill that we don't have, then there must be some, and we had a meeting with the ministry responsible for immigration maybe about 2 years ago. There must be something, some program that is intentional in its approach to making sure that their skills transfer. So even if the request is legitimate, we do not want the person to come, spend 3 years, 4 years, 2 years, and leave. And those of us who are here are no better off. So that is a matter that we shall be addressing. The matter of service delivery, I think we spoke to what we can do and are able to do. We spoke about it in relation to give. We speak to our private sector partners as well. But the big one for me and for us is what I spoke to in relation to Job Start Plus. Investing in those young people, so that many of the challenges that we have now, that we know are sometimes a response to stimuli that not in the workplace at all. Because workers are human beings. They don't walk through the door and put off all the baggage from home or from private life. They have to be trained and coached into how to sometimes compartmentalize, how to separate. It does not happen automatically. We are investing in our young people in that regard. But in terms of the new modes of work, I'll ask the Chief Labor Officer to speak to that.
Thank you, Minister. Madam Chair, the question of the new modes of working, which would be typically, well, not new, but now becoming more popular in our setting, remote work and flexible work and telework, all those things, because there are various iterations of the new models. Principally, one of the first things we need to consider is the approach to ergonomics in those settings. And ergonomics not just being the setup of the workstation and the computer, but also looking at the social environment that the person will now be operating in at home, or if they're doing a hybrid arrangement when they move between the work and the home setting. We also need to consider the wellness approach. And the wellness approach is one where the ministry has done quite a lot of work and intends to continue. There is the wellness policy, the national wellness policy with those 9 dimensions. And the approach to these new ways of working would fit in there. Those dimensions would include, for example, the physical, the social, the cultural, the psychosocial, which is where the whole question now of working at home is bringing us. The psychosocial aspect of how we approach the worker-employer interface in the new setting. What we also need to consider, as Minister alluded to just a short minute ago, is the compartmentalizing and the separation between work and home, even where work becomes home and home is also work. So those are areas that, as a ministry, department, we are very cognizant of, and it is one that has the occupational safety and health leaning when it comes to the ergonomics and the wellness aspects, and there's also the industrial relations leaning, which is one that we can address. The legislation that we have, not that it was developed in contemplation of a situation like this, but it is robust enough to handle the situation. For example, the contract does not vacillate between home and work. It is not that when you're at home it becomes a for, when you're at work it's an of, or that the contract changes. The contract is portable in that whatever is the arrangement you have with the employer or with the person you're offering the service for, but employer in our case, then that moves with you when you go home to work as well. So these are all aspects. There's not a separate program that will look at it, but these are all aspects that have to be worked into the regular programming because of the nature of what we're dealing with. So the legal framework is there that can handle it through the Safety and Health at Work Act, and also the Employment Rights Act to a great extent. Between those two pieces, we can look at that and manage it quite competently and capably. And in addition to that, it is something that we have always included in our programming, and that will continue. Programming in terms of the training and the interface that we have with the employee, and it will also be a part of that sustained media approach that we intend to take this year, where in the information and the messaging that goes out via the various means, there will be more on ergonomics, more on wellness, to get workers and employers more aware and familiar with some of the do's and don'ts when it comes to these new and hybrid arrangements for working.
And so by way, Madam Chair, of wrapping that up, our word to employers is that wherever your employees are, you have a certain fiduciary responsibility, a responsibility to make sure that as they operate within the occupational space, wherever that space is, you have to make sure that they are safe and well, and that you look after the health, safety, and welfare in whichever space they find themselves executing work on behalf of your organizations.
Honorable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Chairperson. Minister, Honorable Minister, and your team, I congratulate you for the work that you have done in advancing the cause of your ministry so far during this term. Just like to ask, and Chairperson, if you permit, I would ask all three together in the interest of time, raise all three issues. Under sub-program 0499 is the Employment Rights Tribunal. Extremely important tribunal within the context of the social advancement of our people. And of course it was formed, as we know, established under the Employment Rights Act 2012, came into force April 2013. And of course your tenure, Honorable Minister, has seen the increase in the workload of this tribunal, which was great even before the bringing into force now of the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act and the Employment Prevention of Discrimination Act, which came into force last year. And the Employment Rights Tribunal, as we know, oversees these acts. But there has been no expansion in terms of the composition of the Employment Rights Tribunal. I think it's 9 members, 3 tribunals each, and it is not a full-time tribunal. The commissioners don't work full-time. Don't you believe, Minister, or is there a policy, are we moving towards a policy where the tribunal will be a full-time rather than, you know, having, of course, the chairperson has to be an attorney at law, and we know the overall chairman of the tribunal is a retired judge, very competent, so he could be full-time, but the other 2 attorneys are obviously not full-time. They have their private practice, and therefore I'm concerned about the strain put on the Employment Rights Tribunal in terms of, I know there was a backlog of cases. I saw that up to middle of last year, there would have been over 200 cases still to be heard. And even though, of course, you're trying with case management, which is extremely good, there will still be a continuing backlog. I believe you could probably give that figure now as to what is the backlog at the present time. So I believe that this tribunal should now be a full-time tribunals with full-time chairpersons to be able to adequately accommodate and process and deal with the increasing mandate that that the tribunal has with these other two pieces of legislation also falling within its purview. If not, people will become frustrated that their claims can't be heard, adjudicated in expeditious manner, and really and truly, we don't want to frustrate our citizens or our claimants in this country. Second issue, Madam Chairperson, if I may, deals with the Caribbean Court of Justice's decision in the Orlando Harris against Chefette Restaurants case, or Chefette Restaurants, because they were the appellants against Orlando Harris. And of course, this case is not sub judice, so I could speak about it. It was a decision given last year. I in fact, had the honor of being the attorney at law in the Court of Appeals case, Orlando Harris constituent of mine, and in both before the Employment Rights Tribunal and our Caribbean Court of Appeal, our Court of Appeal on appeal from the Employment Rights Tribunal's decision, the claimant was awarded monies beyond basic rate. He was awarded compensation for the period after his unfair dismissal, where he was unemployed and could not reasonably find employment. And the case went up to the CCJ. Of course, I was in cabinet at the time, but the CCJ would have reduced the awards package while still ruling in his favor that it was an unfair dismissal, and said he should be awarded just basic rate, and essentially saying that a claimant a claimant would only be given compensation beyond the basic rate if he pleads and can prove entitlement to an additional benefit. So in other words, the period between the unfair dismissal and the time when he could reasonably be expected to find new employment would not be compensated for. Now, I believe, of course, I would not have been in Parliament at the time this act was passed, but certainly the Employment Rights Act would have had its genesis from way back under the administration of the Right Honourable Owen Arthur, and the Deputy President in the other place. No, he was then, that Honourable Senator was then Minister of Labour and coming up right through, and I believe that the whole tenure was that a claimant should be entitled to compensation beyond basic rate on an unfair dismissal. I believe that was the tenor of parliamentarians or the Parliament at that time, and I believe even the Parliament which would have passed that legislation. And I'm wondering, therefore, because Honourable Minister, you did say that you're looking at amending that act, and I'm wondering if this is an area of the act that you're looking at amending to clarify or rather reverse the CCJ decision on that particular point of quantum of compensation. And my final intervention, Madam Chair, would be on the issue of persons with disabilities and employment. And I note, Honourable Minister, in your mandate, you spoke about there was to be a survey for persons with disabilities and mental health persons, but that was deferred because of COVID. I know all the ministries, essentially, or certainly your ministry, had to, and naturally and understandably, cut back on its budget because of COVID, and over the last year, the intervention of COVID. It is, still perhaps regrettable, and I believe you would agree with me, that that survey had to be deferred because persons with disabilities, as we all know, are among the most vulnerable people in this society and need to be protected more than most others from the harshest aspects of COVID. But I'm just wondering if your ministry plans to adopt any policy in terms of employment of persons with disabilities in government. I mean, I don't have to speak in terms of that treaties. I've done it many times in this parliament. But I think we're lagging behind on that issue. Jamaica, for example, as we know, reserves 2% of employment in government, departments and ministries for persons with disabilities, many of whom are just as competent in terms of mental capacity as any other person. And it is not a question of handouts, it's a question of fairness, social justice, equity, and affirmative action, which we are speaking of within the context of our social development and advancement. And I'm wondering, sir, if you have that policy or if there's the intention to have that policy to help give people with disabilities a step up in this society as is their right and place as citizens of this country. I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. If I may speak first to the last question, persons living with disabilities, my team can surely do that. That is also an area that is an area of passion for us. I'll say something that may sound a little bit contradictory to what I said in my opening. And what I said in my opening had to speak to policy that is grounded on information and research and statistics. But even though the survey was deferred, the ministry remains committed to the cause of people living with disabilities, absolutely and firmly committed. That is why in the Employment Prevention of Discrimination Act 2020, we would have included the matter of disability in the list of grounds where employers are prohibited from discriminating, well, to use as a reason for discrimination in the workplace setting. So we are firmly fixed, if I may use those two words together, in our minds about the role of people living with disabilities and our responsibility to assist in the protection of their rights. There are representation from two organizations on the Social Justice Committee, and the input of persons and therefore the organizations they represent on that Social Justice Committee also speaks to our commitment to make sure that their voices are heard. And not just heard, but listened to. So the ministry remains committed as it relates to the public service. Honourable members should be, I have to make you aware that there is a ministry for the public service, but we've committed ourselves as the ministry responsible for labour, even though part of the public service would be within our remit in terms of state-owned enterprises. One of the things that we will be doing is intensifying, and we've started, we haven't gotten very far in this, but we'll be intensifying our collaboration with the Ministry of the Public Service, even though we're two separate ministries. The minister responsible for the public service, the Honourable Prime Minister, has indicated that we can have closer collaboration, and we will be sharing with them, just as they will be sharing with us, what we're doing and how we can better provide both in action, but ultimately likely in policy, to ensure that we do not leave out, forget, put one side people living with disabilities who are just as much human beings as we are. The matter of the CCJ, well, you will know that our interpretation was the same as yours, was the same as the local court of appeal. That matter in relation to compensation, but also in relation, a related matter which is more in relation to sanction if employers who have judgments made against them do not follow through and make good on the ruling of the tribunal. Sanction, those are two things that will be occupying our attention in relation to amendments to the Employment Rights Act. I said earlier that we'd completed one phase of the review of the Act, and what I'll use this opportunity to say that there are two other phases. One relates to issues coming out of the working of the tribunal and how it can be made better. So that particular judgment, and then also any enforcement of payments and sanctions if the payments aren't made on time. That is another phase, and that is a phase that we are to commence. And the third phase is to make rules for the working of the tribunal. That has been another issue, and this probably speaks to some of the structure that you were talking about and this is now kind of sliding from your second question into your first. The Employment Rights Act was put into force, but there have been no rules put into force. And just like we have spent quite a lot of time doing with the Safety and Health at Work Act, getting those regulations sorted out. You know, our job in government has been a lot of cleaning up. I don't want to say of mess, only because this is not the forum, because I'm sitting here with technical officers who are not political. But if I were not here with them, I would have said that we're cleaning up a lot of mess. I can't say it because I'm with them, but we have been doing a lot of cleaning up. So the regulations to the Safety and Health at Work Act is one, but the Employment Rights Act also needs rules for the operation of the tribunal. And that is another phase of the work that we're actually about to embark on. That particular phase, we have some draft rules, and we are going to be reviewing those in very short order. The matter of full-time, part-time, now this is something that the Permanent Secretary and myself have spent a lot of time working through. The work, and I want to say this publicly, and this is not just for the public, but there are some others who need to hear this. The tribunal does a lot of work. This tribunal, the Employment Rights Tribunal, is not like every other tribunal. This tribunal is a tribunal that will have to defend cases in a Caribbean Court of Justice. So the judgments that are written are not simple judgments. They are judgments that have to stand scrutiny of the highest court of our land, that court being the Caribbean Court of Justice. Now, we are going to be going to Cabinet to speak to the implications of that. And like you said, Honorable Member, there are additional pieces of legislation that have been added to the remit of the Employment Rights Tribunal. So it's not just the Employment Rights Act. It is, as you indicated, there are two other pieces. The last one is the Prevention of Discrimination, Employment Prevention of Discrimination Act. This adds to the caseload, and there is going to be the need for expansion of resources. Now, we've not been reacting. We've already put some plans in place. We've added some people resources. We've added some equipment resources. So at this point, we could actually have 3 tribunals operating simultaneously. But you are correct, Honorable Member, that 2 of our chairs have private practice as well. And so one of the things that we have to consider, given the increase in workload and the potential for further increase depending on how the labor code plays out and how that is structured, it means that we may have to look to having one or more being full-time, but we also have to look very seriously at the remuneration of our chairs particularly, but the tribunals generally, because their work is deep, their work is extensive, you support the case management. That takes up, and that is something which doesn't happen in the glare of the public. The hearings happen in the public glare. Case management happens behind the scenes, much like what happens in regular courts of law, so that we can get to the point which we've gotten to, where some people decide, look, all right, from this I realize that I'm wrong. Let me work out how much the worker is owed, and let's call it George or Jenny, so as not to be gender biased. But those are matters that we are addressing, and those are matters that we're going to put squarely on the table because the workload is great, and we have to make sure that justice delayed is not justice denied. Like you indicated, Honorable Member, we have to ensure at all costs that the people of this country, the workers of this country, do not believe that when a case goes to the Employment Rights Tribunal, that it is lost and that their perspective will never come to the table. We have to make sure that doesn't happen, and so we'll be going to Cabinet in relatively short order on the matter of expanding, deepening, strengthening this entire structure. I'll ask the Chief Labor Officer to give an update on the numbers for our benefit.
As we speak, the tribunal has 206 cases in hand, and over the course of the next 5-6 weeks, at least to start with, there is the plan to meet every Thursday and to have at least 2 hearings over the 2 hearings per Thursday over those 5 to 6 weeks. And we are satisfied that the cases have been heard with increasing regularity in recent times, and many of the claims have also been dispatched through the case management process, which was also a new introduction.
I should also add, Madam Chair, to the Honourable Member's query that increasing caseload, well, the load that we currently have and the load that is likely to be there when more pieces of legislation are added, means that we also proactively have to look for a home for the tribunal. If it is going to meet with increasing regularity, then it can't be in a room that is going to be used by somebody else, and then you have to do the shifting. Even though there is the use of technology, there are still situations where the face-to-face meeting is going to be important, and so that is one of the considerations that we will be focusing our minds to as well.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. George North.
Thank you. Minister, I want to thank you for very expansive explanations that you have offered to the many questions, very pointed questions that have been asked in this chamber. One of the major planks of the Ministry of Labor's work has to do with advancing the decent work agenda. Indeed, Barbados is one of the countries that's signed on to it, and so we have a program, a decent work country program. Now, COVID-19 has hit 3 particular dimensions of that program in terms of the quantity of jobs available, high unemployment, the quality of those jobs, and many of us have discussed those aspects here this morning. And specifically the 3rd dimension, addressing the needs of the vulnerable. I thought that the Honourable Member of St. Michael West would have gone on to ask the question regarding minimum wage, of what is the Ministry of Labor's specific plan to advance the minimum wage. The proposal is for $8.50 per hour. which translates to $340 a week if one is able to work a 40-hour week. And anybody seeking, I'm sure any of the honorable members, if they had to be restricted to $340 a week, would find challenge making ends meet. So I want to find out what is the ministry's specific plan to move that $8.50 proposed for a minimum wage towards what would align to a living wage, a wage that the average citizen should be able to get by on. And then what is the further plan in advancing the decent work agenda pillar of social protection for all? What is the further plan to help us boost or improve our social protection system? We recognize during this COVID period that the government had to intervene in many respects to lend assistance to people who didn't have coverage under our social security system. We heard the honorable member for St. James Central speaking very eloquently to some aspects of that yesterday. So in short, what is the Ministry of Labor's plan as it relates to leading and advancing policy towards an improved minimum wage that aligns to the living wage and advancing the need for social protection coverage for all?
Thank you very much, honorable member. You are correct that Barbados is fully a part of has fully embraced the decent work agenda as leaders, as part of the leadership of the International Labour Organization. But not just because we are part of the leadership of the ILO, it is also because that is how we view as good Barbadians, that decency is one of those things that we value, and decent work. However, that word, and I remember having some challenges when I first came to the ministry on the technical definition versus the Bayesian definition. I like the Bayesian definition. And we go for decent work based on how Bayesians talk about decency. A living wage is part of that decent work agenda. A person who goes to work must, at the end of some work period, be able to live reasonably comfortably. And that is something that is our policy from a ministry perspective. At this point in our history, we recognize that the existing minimum wage is much too low. The minimum wage was supposed to have been higher in a past dispensation. In our manifesto before we came into office, that which we have and continue to refer to and believe and understand to be a contract with the people, we indicated that we would raise the minimum wage. Now, we did not prepare that manifesto knowing that COVID would have been in the picture. And so we've had to balance, from a policy perspective, the understanding that the existing minimum wage is too low. It is more poverty wage than anything else. It does not provide nearly enough to allow people to feel fulfilled and properly rewarded for their labor, for their work, for the intellect and creativity that they put into their activities in relation to the people who are the organizations that they are part of. And so we've set about to raise that minimum wage. You've identified that number, which we have made public. We have, while doing that, been very cognizant of the environment within which we find ourselves. Under normal circumstances, we would likely have proposed a step system to get to where we ultimately would want to get. The experience of the past year has said to us that we need to do sometimes what is done in other forms of activity, which is you have in your mind what you want to do, But because of the uncertainty that is before us, let us take the first step. And we've decided from a policy perspective that we would take the first step, but that we would indicate when we would have a discussion on the next step. Not necessarily what the next step would be, even though conceptually we know we have to go to a certain place. I'm using this to say that that place is further up. In other words, further increases. Quantum, time frame, given the uncertainty of now, what we will do is to take the initial step and have the review done at a particular point in time in early 2022, I think is when we're going to have that next review. But we understand that a minimum wage does not necessarily equate to a living wage. And as a government, we are called on to balance, to approach policy in a balanced way, to make sure that people can live and that people can be employed. And that is a balancing act that is not always easy to do, but it is something that we are called on to do, and we have to put our best foot forward where that is concerned. So we'll have that initial increase on the effective the 1st of April of 2021. Now, you also spoke to a very important part of the Decent Work Program, that matter of social protection. The ILO speaks to protection floors. There are certain minima which we should not, as a country, fall below. And I really want to tie this into the whole matter of casualization. And what I just said about minimum wage. We are on alert, and part of our proactivity is speaking to it. I spoke to it a few weeks ago, I'm going to say it now again. Given the pending increase in minimum wage, we are already, even before it becomes effective, we are already on the alert for any actions by employers that will seek to, because of a disagreement with an increase at this point, move workers from being employees, as far as they're concerned, they're being employers, to being self-employed. We are already on the alert, we are already looking out for any such action. It will be met with a swift response from this ministry. We will enforce the law as well as the rulings, the precedents that come from previous rulings of our legal system. That casualization is one of the issues that affects social protection, because very often people end up with the same net pay that they may have had as employees, but then because there is not sometimes the understanding of contribution or not the ability to take additional out of that net to contribute to Social Security, those persons end up not being covered. And the worst part of it for me and for us is that employers do not have then the responsibility of the employer's portion of national insurance. And that is important, and we, from a policy perspective, but also from an enforcement perspective, will be ensuring that that happens. Now, the other side of it, well, not the other side, the complementary arm to that is moving people, workers, from the informal sector to the formal sector. And that is also a matter, I mean, we've had it on our agenda, but there are so many things on the agenda that it was not one that we were able to apply ourselves to initially. The pandemic has really amplified the need for us to move people from the informal sector to the formal sector. We intend to do that in a number of ways. One aspect of the First Jobs program, Job Start Plus, is to educate young people about the need to contribute to the Social Security system for their own benefit and for the benefit of the country generally. So that is one area, but we also realize, and the Chief Labor Officer spoke to this earlier, we have to connect with others. And so our social media programming will also speak to the need for people to be covered by Social Security. All of that understanding, like the chief did say, that the National Insurance Department has primary responsibility, but we have responsibility for workers and potential workers, and we will do all that we can to make sure that there is the understanding that whether you are a hairdresser, whether you are an office worker, whether you are a CEO, whether you are an attorney at law, and by the way, there are many of our professionals who are earning a lot more than minimum wage, who are contributing amounts that equate to if they were working for minimum wage. And so all workers, all Barbadians need to see, and we will, as a ministry, be moving to ensure, well, continuing our push to make sure that everybody is covered by the social protection system. I will have to say to you, I mean, we have representation on the board of the National Insurance Board, well, on the National Insurance Board, sorry, but we have to deepen our relationship with the National Insurance Department so that we can pool our resources to be more impactful in that area as we address society generally.
Thank you. Honorable Member for Christchurch South, pass.
Thank you, Madam Chair of Committees, and good afternoon to all. Minister, I have had previous occasion to say to you that you occupy one of the offices that is unglamorous, and that when one considers that government is an employer, and indeed that government is the largest single employer, it must make the office of Minister of Labor, if not unique, certainly invidious. And I want to commend the dignity and the clarity of thought and certainly the philosophical conviction that you have brought to this office. I really must do that. I sat here for the period that I've been here. I've heard you express yourself on the roles of HR persons in the corporate environment. A few minutes ago, I've heard you express yourself as to how you feel about a minimum wage in Barbados. And you don't normally hear ministers speak like this. And you don't normally hear, certainly ministers of labor, speak like this. And Mr. Minister, I really sincerely commend your approach to this office that perhaps in many ways is quite a lonely office. That is to say, the defense of labor. No other minister can claim that he has a portfolio, that he has a mandate that places him in defense of labor. And having said that, I also want to say and to ask of you at the same time, well, I will first say it, that I hope it is also your conviction that the workplace is not a place of natural mutual enmity, that in a progressive environment, the employer should be as happy as the employee and vice versa. And I hope and I believe I can say confidently that you must also believe that. We live in an environment in which businesses receive all kinds of concessions, all kinds of benefits. They're given the opportunity, even small businesses as we discussed yesterday, they're given the opportunity to thrive. Now, you cannot discuss workers' rights and the role of the worker unless, of course, you focus on the trade unions, which is that largest collective voice in defense of the worker. And I am not very skilled at reading the voluminous document that is before me, But can we claim a future in which workers' unions may find themselves being the beneficiaries of government assistance, particularly in relation to the education of workers? As I've said before, an educated worker is more than likely going to be a happy worker. And I say also to the employers that an educated worker will make for a happy and harmonious working environment. As I said before, there ought not to be any perception that the workplace is naturally hostile. I've said to you, Minister, that a lot of assistance is given to companies in this country and throughout the world, throughout the Western world, certainly. Can we now claim that we will occupy a future in which workers' unions and labor unions can receive some kind of assistance, certainly in terms of mass education of workers and educating them to regard the workplace in an uplifting manner and to regard the workplace possibly as a harmonious environment? That is my question to you. And let me be specific. I ask it because I am aware now that there is a decline in formal workers' education in this country. I trust you're following me. That is my question to you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member.
And you look very well, by the way, today.
Well, I am happy that I do, because as you indicated earlier, this responsibility comes with some challenges, and I will tell you that I left home. I'm glad the curfew was shifted a little bit. I had to leave home yesterday evening to clear my head.
We're not hearing you very well, Minister.
All right, well, I'm depending on those responsible for the technology. I'm not sure if you hear me any better now.
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Okay. I was thanking you for your comments and encouragement. I also am thanking you for the indication that I look well. I have started to go on to say that you are correct in that this responsibility is unglamorous, often stressful. Yesterday, I had a long day yesterday, but it was also a very stressful day. And I said that I was happy that the restrictions in terms of the curfew had been changed a little bit, because I had to leave home to clear my head, to do a couple of things and get my head clear. It is very challenging. Those who sent me to this place didn't send me for any glamour, and they know me well enough to know that I am not a glamour person anyhow. I have often said, I've never been part of the cocktail circuit. I don't appear in social scene and those kinds of things. So those are not particular challenges for me. But I also find the role fulfilling, because all of us on this team are determined to make a difference in our various areas. Sometimes we have to pull along each other, but all of us are committed to making a difference for the workers of this country. However, I also need to say, and I think this is kind of to address your statement, we are defenders of the workers of this country. And so we work hand in hand with workers' organizations, so that is to say trade unions, to defend the rights of workers. The compendium of labor legislation, I think that's a word I got from my chief labor officer, but the compendium of labor legislation is administered by us. So protection of workers is upfront for us. However, we also have a relationship, and a strong relationship, with those who employ workers. And so I say, and continue to say, we are not doing one at the expense of the other.
Minister, while I'd love to hear you, we need to wrap up soon so that you could answer the question and then go straight to your wrap up.
The work of this ministry then is to make sure that both workers are defended and that employers recognize their responsibility. So the matter of what I call worker management relations is an important one for us. For me personally, one of my first forays into this area was a couple of decades ago, attending what we used to call at the time Promalco, it was the ILO regional office, promotion of labor management relations. And we had one of our seminars in Jamaica many years ago. But that has guided not just myself, but also those who work in the ministry with us. Our responsibility to the workers, but also the responsibility to employers, and a responsibility to say to both parties, workers and employers, that there are rights that you have, and that with those rights come responsibilities. Now, to the question of government assistance, government remains committed to assisting trade unions in this country and employers' organizations, and so part of our budget includes assistance. We, like the government that we are part of, also recognize that we have a responsibility that goes beyond our shores. And so you will also see in our estimates of expenditure support to the Caribbean Congress of Labor. On the matter of worker training, we have had in our plans, and this is one of those things that COVID kind of knocked out. Well, not knocked out, but maybe shifted a little bit. We had some plans in place to do quite a lot of joint training activity. You will understand that with the advent of COVID and the need to move to an electronic way of doing that training, we've pushed ahead using the National Transformation Initiative. In our ministry, we started work with Coursera. We had thousands of Barbadians enrolled, and Permanent Secretary and Randy, one of the program officers here, really put a lot of effort into that. They've taken it to the point now where they've transferred the responsibility for that. So we see it more as giving birth, nurturing, and if you would permit me to use a religious idea, this is now Samuel having been taken to the temple, and we've handed it over to the National Transformation Initiative. So we've had to go ahead to do that, but we still have in our focus working with trade unions in the matter of training of workers, because we realize, like you've said, Honorable Member for Christchurch South, that a trained worker, but also a trained employer, is likely to operate with more understanding within the workplace, and so be less prone to see the workplace as somehow a naturally antagonistic environment, but one where there can be mutual benefit, where you don't have to agree with everything the other one says, but that you can work things through as adults do. In my wrap-up, I want to thank all honorable members for the questions, for the suggestions, for the challenges thrown out to us as a ministry. I want to thank, and I am thanking, my team that I introduced at the beginning. They have been working hard, and even in a COVID-19 environment where we've been out of the office, our Permanent Secretary has made sure that we're all equipped, laptops, those who need to be in contact with the public have the means of contact. So labor officers have cell phones so that the public can remain in contact with us, because we are there to help workers, particularly those who have challenges or who have grievances. In our leading in the matter of workplace wellness, those who indicated to the Permanent Secretary that they may have needed to take their chair home because ergonomics is, we don't want ill people. Permanent Secretary has also allowed for that. So we've been doing all that we can, and I want to thank the team for really working hard in the various areas, but also working hard together to make sure that the ministry does execute its mandate and does what the public expects it to do in spending this 7.2 million. I want also, in wrapping up, to say that I've received in the intervening period the numbers for unemployment at the end of the fourth quarter. The unemployment figure 13.6% at the end of the fourth quarter, and that is down or an improvement from the 17.9% at the end of the second quarter. The Minister responsible for Economic Affairs, the Honorable Member for St. Michael South Central, has always been saying that we don't do a day-to-day tracking of movement, but we do have those numbers at the end of the third and fourth quarter. What that ministry and our ministry also does would be to use information coming out of the National Insurance Department so that we get an idea of what is going up, what is going down, what the temperature is as it relates to unemployment. So 13.6% at the end of the fourth quarter, down from 17.9 at the end of the third quarter. I also will say with that our responsibility remains to prepare Barbadians for fruitful and fulfilling work endeavors, to create that just, reasonable, fair society, to make sure that workers in that society and in workplaces are looked after, that their rights are respected, to make sure they're trained and educated, to allow them to know that we stand ready to protect them and to fight for their rights, and to do our part with them and with employers to make sure we have a prosperous and productive country that all of us can live and play and enjoy and recreate and have our children educated and really enjoy our existence here. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And with that, the question is that head 3084 in the sum of $7,237,600 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it. Question is that I do not, seconded, question is that I do not report to His Honor the Speaker progress and ask for leave to sit again. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported progress and asks for leave to sit again. Unrelated government business. Please turn on your mic, please.
Mr. Speaker, I propose that we should take our break for lunch at this time. I'd like to suggest that we come back at 2:30.
At what time, sir?
2:30.
2:30?
If that meets your...
2:30?
Yes, if that meets with your honor, the Speaker's permission. We're going to do housing after.
Are you sure that's enough time, 2:30?
Well, I'm guided by the Speaker. Perhaps the Speaker would prefer 2:45.
2:45 sounds more appropriate and convenient.
I think the ayes have it.
The question is that this honorable chairman will be suspended until 2:45 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chairman stands suspended until 2:45 p.m.